fell to grating nutmeg, with a vigor which made red cheeks the most natural thing in life. Maud, the traitor, sat demurely at work, looking very like what Tom had called her, a magpie with mischief in its head. Polly felt a change in the atmosphere, but merely thought Tom was tired, so she graciously dismissed him with a stick of cinnamon, as she had nothing else just then to lay upon the shrine. "Fan's got the books and maps you wanted. Go and rest now." "I'm much obliged, here's your wages, Bridget." "Good luck to your messes," answered Tom, as he walked away meditatively crunching his cinnamon, and looking as if he did not find it as spicy as usual. He got his books, but did not read them, for, shutting himself up in the little room called Tom's den, he just sat down and brooded. When he came down to breakfast the next morning, he was greeted with a general "Happy birthday, Tom," and at his place lay gifts from every member of the family, not as costly as formerly, perhaps, but infinitely dearer, as tokens of the love that had outlived the change, and only grown the warmer for the test of misfortune. In his present state of mind, Tom felt as if he did not deserve a blessed thing, so when everyone exerted themselves to make it a happy day for him, he understood what it means to be nearly killed with kindness and sternly resolved to be an honor to his family, or perish in the attempt. Evening brought Polly to what she called a festive tea, and when they gathered round the table, another gift appeared, which, though not of a sentimental nature, touched Tom more than all the rest. It was a most delectable cake, with a nosegay atop, and round it on the snowy frosting there ran a pink inscription, just as it had been every year since Tom could remember. "Name, age, and date, like a nice white tombstone," observed Maud, complacently, at which funereal remark, Mrs. Shaw, who was down in honor of the day, dropped her napkin, and demanded her salts. "Whose doing is that?" asked Tom, surveying the gift with satisfaction, for it recalled the happier birthdays, which seemed very far away now. "I didn't know what to give you, for you've got everything a man wants, and I was in despair till I remembered that dear grandma always made you a little cake like that, and that you once said it wouldn't be a happy birthday without it. So I tried to make it just like hers, and I do hope it will prove a good, sweet, plummy one." "Thank you," was all Tom said, as he smiled at the giver, but Polly knew that her present had pleased him more than the most elegant trifle she could have made. "It ought to be good, for you beat it up yourself," Tom cried, "Maud. It was so funny to see you working away, and never guessing who the cake was for. I perfectly trembled every time you opened your mouth, for fear you'd ask some question about it. That was the reason Polly preached and I kept talking when she was gone. Very stupid of me, but I forgot all about today. Suppose we cut it? I don't seem to care for anything else," said Tom, feeling no appetite, but bound to do justice to that cake, if he fell a victim to his gratitude. "I hope the plums won't all be at the bottom," said Polly, as she rose to do the honors of the cake, by universal appointment. "I've had a good many at the top already, you know," answered Tom, watching the operation with as much interest as if he had faith in the omen. Cutting carefully, slice after slice fell apart, each firm and dark, spicy and rich, under the frosty rime above, and laying a specially large piece in one of Grandma's quaint little china plates. Polly added the flowers and handed it to Tom, with a look that said a good deal, for, seeing that he remembered her sermon, she was glad to find that her allegory held good, in one sense at least. Tom's face brightened as he took it, and after an inspection which amused the others very much he looked up, saying, with an air of relief, "Plums all through, I'm glad I had a hand in it, but Polly deserves the credit, and must wear the posy." And turning to her, he put the rose into her hair with more gallantry than taste, for a thorn pricked her head, the leaves tickled her ear, and the flower was upside down. Fanny laughed at his want of skill, but Polly wouldn't have it altered, and everybody fell to eating cake, as if indigestion was one of the lost arts. They had a lively tea, and were getting on famously afterward, when 2 letters were brought for Tom, who glanced at one, and retired rather precipitately to his den, leaving Maud consumed with curiosity, and the older girls slightly excited, for Fan thought she recognized the handwriting on one, and Polly, on the other. 1/2 an hour and then another elapsed, and Tom did not return. Mr. Shaw went out, Mrs. Shaw retired to her room escorted by Maud, and the 2 girls sat together wondering if anything dreadful had happened. All of a sudden a voice called, "Polly," and that young lady started out of her chair, as if the sound had been a thunderclap. "Do run. I'm perfectly fainting to know what the matter is," said Fan. "You'd better go," began Polly, wishing to obey, yet feeling a little shy. "He don't want me, besides, I couldn't say a word for myself if that letter was from Sydney," cried Fanny, hustling her friend towards the door, in a great flutter. Polly went without another word, but she wore a curiously anxious look, and stopped on the threshold of the den, as if a little afraid of its occupant. Tom was sitting in his favorite attitude, astride of a chair, with his arms folded and his chin on the top rail, not an elegant posture, but the only one in which, he said, he could think well. "Did you want me, Tom?" "Yes." "Come in, please, and don't look scared. I only want to show you a present I've had, and ask your advice about accepting it." "Why, Tom, you look as if you had been knocked down," exclaimed Polly, forgetting all about herself, as she saw his face when he rose and turned to meet her. "I have, regularly floored, but I'm up again, and steadier than ever. Just you read that, and tell me what you think of it." Tom snatched a letter off the table, put it into her hands, and began to walk up and down the little room, like a veritable bear in its cage. As Polly read that short note, all the color went out of her face, and her eyes began to kindle. When she came to the end, she stood a minute, as if too indignant to speak, then gave the paper a nervous sort of crumple and dropped it on the floor, saying, all in one breath, "I think she is a mercenary, heartless, ungrateful girl. That's what I think. Oh, the deuce. I didn't mean to show that one, it's the other." And Tom took up a second paper, looking half angry, half ashamed at his own mistake. "I don't care, though, everyone will know tomorrow, and perhaps you'll be good enough to keep the girls from bothering me with questions and gabble," he added, as if, on second thoughts, he was relieved to have the communication made to Polly first. "I don't wonder you looked upset. If the other letter is as bad, I'd better have a chair before I read it," said Polly, feeling that she began to tremble with excitement. "It's a million times better, but it knocked me worse than the other. Kindness always does." Tom stopped short there, and stood a minute turning the letter about in his hand as if it contained a sweet which neutralized the bitter in that smaller note, and touched him very much. Then he drew up an armchair, and beckoning Polly to take it, said in a sober, steady tone, that surprised her greatly, "Whenever I was in a quandary, I used to go and consult Grandma, and she always had something sensible or comfortable to say to me. She's gone now, but somehow, Polly, you seem to take her place. Would you mind sitting in her chair, and letting me tell you 2 or 3 things, as Will does? Mind it?" Polly felt that Tom had paid her the highest and most beautiful compliment he could have devised. She had often longed to do it, for, being brought up in the most affectionate and frank relations with her brothers, she had early learned what it takes most women some time to discover, that sex does not make nearly as much difference in hearts and souls as we fancy. Joy and sorrow, love and fear, life and death bring so many of the same needs to all, that the wonder is we do not understand each other better, but wait till times of tribulation teach us that human nature is very much the same in men and women. Thanks to this knowledge, Polly understood Tom in a way that surprised and won him. She knew that he wanted womanly sympathy, and that she could give it to him, because she was not afraid to stretch her hand across the barrier which our artificial education puts between boys and girls, and to say to him in all good faith, "If I can help you, let me." 10 minutes sooner Polly could have done this almost as easily to Tom as to Will, but in that 10 minutes something had happened which made this difficult. Reading that Trix had given Tom back his freedom changed many things to Polly, and caused her to shrink from his confidence, because she felt as if it would be harder now to keep self out of sight, for, spite of maiden modesty, love and hope would wake and sing at the good news. Slowly she sat down, and hesitatingly she said, with her eyes on the ground, and a very humble voice, "I'll do my best, but I can't fill Grandma's place, or give you any wise, good advice. I wish I could. You'll do it better than anyone else. Talk troubles mother, father has enough to think of without any of my worries. Fan is a good soul, but she isn't practical, and we always get into a snarl if we try to work together, so who have I but my other sister, Polly? The pleasure that letter will give you may make up for my boring you." As he spoke, Tom laid the other paper in her lap, and went off to the window, as if to leave her free to enjoy it unseen, but he could not help a glance now and then, and as Polly's face brightened, his own fell. "Oh, Tom, that's a birthday present worth having, for it's so beautifully given I don't see how you can refuse it. Arthur Sidney is a real nobleman, cried Polly, looking up at last, with her fact glowing, and her eyes full of delight. So he is. I don't know another man living, except father, who would have done such a thing, or who I could bring myself to take it from. Do you see, he's not only paid the confounded debts, but has done it in my name, to spare me all he could. I see, it's like him, and I think he must be very happy to be able to do such a thing. It is an immense weight off my shoulders, for some of those men couldn't afford to wait till I'd begged, borrowed, or earned the money. Sidney can wait, but he won't long, if I know myself. You won't take it as a gift, then? Would you? No, then don't think I will. I'm a pretty poor affair, Polly, but I'm not mean enough to do that, while I've got a conscience and a pair of hands. A rough speech, but it pleased Polly better than the smoothest Tom had ever made in her hearing, for something in his face and voice told her that the friendly act had roused a nobler sentiment than gratitude, making the cancelled obligations of the boy debts of honor to the man. What will you do, Tom? I'll tell you. May I sit here? And Tom took the low footstool that always stood near Grandma's old chair. I've had so many plans in my head lately, that sometimes it seems as if it would split, continued the poor fellow, rubbing his tired forehead, as if to polish up his wits. I've thought seriously of going to California, Australia, or some out-of-the-way place, where men get rich in a hurry. Oh, no, cried Polly, putting out her hand as if to keep him, and then snatching it back again before he could turn round. It would be hard on Mother and the girls, I suppose. Besides, I don't quite like it myself. Looks as if I shirked and ran away. So it does, said Polly, decidedly. Well, you see, I don't seem to find anything to do unless I turn clerk, and I don't think that would suit. The fact is, I couldn't stand it here, where I'm known. It would be easier to scratch gravel on a railroad, with a gang of paddies, than to sell pins to my friends and neighbors. False pride, I dare say, but it's the truth, and there's no use in dodging. Not a bit, and I quite agree with you. That's comfortable. Now I'm coming to the point where I specially want your advice, Polly. Yesterday I heard you telling Fan about your brother Ned, how well he got on, how he liked his business, and wanted Will to come and take some place near him. You thought I was reading, but I heard, and it struck me that perhaps I could get a chance out west somewhere. What do you think? If you really mean work, I know you could, answered Polly, quickly, as all sorts of plans and projects went sweeping through her mind. I wish you could be with Ned, you'd get on together, I'm sure, and he'd be so glad to do anything he could. I'll write and ask, straight away, if you want me to. Suppose you do, just for information, you know, then I shall have something to go upon. I want to have a feasible plan all ready, before I speak to Father. There's nothing so convincing to businessmen as facts, you know. Polly could not help smiling at Tom's new tone, It seemed so strange to hear him talking about anything but horses and tailors, dancing and girls. She liked it, however, as much as she did the sober expression of his face, and the way he had lately of swinging his arms about, as if he wanted to do something energetic with them. That will be wise. Do you think your father will like this plan? Pretty sure he will. Yesterday, when I told him I must go at something right off, he said, "Anything honest, Tom, and don't forget that your father began the world as a shop boy." You knew that, didn't you? Yes, he told me the story once, and I always liked to hear it, because it was pleasant to see how well he had succeeded. I never did like the story, a little bit ashamed, I'm afraid, but when we talked it over last night, it struck me in a new light, and I understood why father took the failure so well, and seems so contented with this poorish place. It is only beginning again, he says, and having worked his way up once, he feels as if he could again. I declare to you, Polly, that sort of confidence in himself, and energy and courage in a man of his years, makes me love and respect the dear old gentleman as I never did before. I'm so glad to hear you say that, Tom. I've sometimes thought you didn't quite appreciate your father, any more than he knew how much of a man you were. Never was till today, you know, said Tom, laughing, yet looking as if he felt the dignity of his 21 years. Odd, isn't it, how people live together ever so long, and don't seem to find one another out, till something comes to do it for them. Perhaps this smash-up was sent to introduce me to my own father. There's philosophy for you, said Polly, smiling, even while she felt as if adversity was going to do more for Tom than years of prosperity. They both sat quiet for a minute, Polly in the big chair looking at him with a new respect in her eyes, Tom on the stool nearby slowly tearing up a folded paper he had absently taken from the floor while he talked. Did this surprise you? He asked, as a little white shower fluttered from his hands. No, well, it did me. For you know, as soon as we came to grief I offered to release Trix from the engagement, and she wouldn't let me, continued Tom, as if, having begun the subject, he wished to explain it thoroughly. That surprised me, said Polly. So it did me, for Fan always insisted it was the money and not the man she cared for. Her first answer pleased me very much, for I did not expect it, and nothing touches a fellow more than to have a woman stand by him through thick and thin. She don't seem to have done it. Fan was right. Trix only waited to see how bad things really were, or rather her mother did. She's as cool, hard, and worldly-minded an old soul as I ever saw, and Trix is bound to obey. She gets round it very neatly in her note, I won't be a burden, will sacrifice her hopes and always remain my warm friend, but the truth is, Tom Shaw rich was worth making much of, but Tom Shaw poor is in the way, and may go to the devil as fast as he likes. Well, he isn't going, cried Polly, defiantly, for her wrath burned hotly against Trix, though she blessed her for setting the bondman free. Came within an ace of it, muttered Tom to himself, adding aloud, in a tone of calm resignation that assured Polly his heart would not be broken though his engagement was. "It never rains but it pours, specially in hard times, but when a man is down, a rap or two more don't matter much, I suppose. It's the first blow that hurts most. Glad to see you take the last blow so well." There was an ironical little twang to that speech, and Polly couldn't help it. Tom colored up and looked hurt for a minute, then seemed to right himself with a shrug, and said, in his outspoken way, "To tell the honest truth, Polly, it was not a very hard one. I've had a feeling for some time that Trix and I were not suited to one another, and it might be wiser to stop short. But she did not or would not see it, and I was not going to back out, and leave her to wear any more willows, so here we are. I don't bear malice, but hope she'll do better, and not be disappointed again, upon my word I do." "That's very good of you, quite Sydney-esque and noble," said Polly, feeling rather ill at ease, and wishing she could hide herself behind a cap and spectacles, if she was to play grandma to this confiding youth. "It will be all plain sailing for Sid, I fancy," observed Tom, getting up as if the little cricket suddenly ceased to be comfortable. "I hope so," murmured Polly, wondering what was coming next. "He deserves the very best of everything, and I pray the Lord he may get it," added Tom, poking the fire in a destructive manner. Polly made no answer, fearing to pay too much, for she knew Fan had made no confidant of Tom, and she guarded her friend's secret as jealously as her own. "You'll write to Ned tomorrow, will you?" "I'll take anything he's got, for I want to be off," said Tom, casting down the poker, and turning round with a resolute air which was lost on Polly, who sat twirling the rose that had fallen into her lap. "I'll write tonight." "Would you like me to tell the girls about Trix and Sydney?" she asked as she rose, feeling that the council was over. "I wish you would. I don't know how to thank you for all you've done for me. I wish to heaven I did," said Tom, holding out his hand with a look that Polly thought a great deal too grateful for the little she had done. As she gave him her hand, and looked up at him with those confiding eyes of hers, Tom's gratitude seemed to fly to his head, for, without the slightest warning, he stooped down and kissed her, a proceeding which startled Polly so that he recovered himself at once, and retreated into his den with the incoherent apology, "I beg pardon, couldn't help it, Grandma always let me on my birthday." While Polly took refuge upstairs, forgetting all about Fan, as she sat in the dark with her face hidden, wondering why she wasn't very angry, and resolving never again to indulge in the delightful but dangerous pastime of playing grandmother. Chapter 18. The woman who did not dare, Polly wrote enthusiastically, Ned answered satisfactorily, and after much corresponding, talking, and planning, it was decided that Tom should go west. Never mind what the business was, it suffices to say that it was a good beginning for a young man like Tom, who, having been born and bred in the most conservative class of the most conceited city in New England, needed just the healthy, hearty, social influences of the West to widen his views and make a man of him. Of course there was much lamentation among the women, but every one felt it was the best thing for him, so while they sighed they sewed, packed visions of a brilliant future away with his new pocket handkerchiefs, and rejoiced that the way was open before him even in the act of bedewing his boots with tears. Sidney stood by him to the last, like a man and a brother, which expression of Tom's gave Fanny infinite satisfaction, and Will felt entirely consoled for Ned's disappointment at his refusal to go and join him, since Tom was to take the place Ned had kept for him. Fortunately everyone was so busy with the necessary preparations that there was no time for romance of any sort, and the four young people worked together as soberly and sensibly as if all sorts of emotions were not bottled up in their respective hearts. But in spite of the silence, the work, and the hurry, I think they came to know one another better in that busy little space of time than in all the years that had gone before, for the best and bravest in each was up and stirring, and the small house was as full of the magnetism of love and friendship, self-sacrifice and enthusiasm, as the world outside was full of spring sunshine and enchantment. Pity that the end should come so soon, but the hour did its work and went its way, leaving a clearer atmosphere behind, though the young folks did not see it then, for their eyes were dim because of the partings that must be. Tom was off to the west, Polly went home for the summer, Maud was taken to the seaside with Belle, and Fanny left alone to wrestle with housekeeping, help and heartache. If it had not been for two things, I fear she never would have stood a summer in town, but Sidney often called, till his vacation came, and a voluminous correspondence with Polly beguiled the long days. Tom wrote once a week to his mother, but the letters were short and not very satisfactory, for men never do tell the interesting little things that women best like to hear. Fanny forwarded her bits of news to Polly. Polly sent back all the extracts from Ned's letters concerning Tom, and by putting the two reports together, they gained the comfortable assurance that Tom was well, in good spirits, hard at work, and intent on coming out strong in spite of all obstacles. Polly had a quiet summer at home, resting and getting ready in mind and body for another winter's work, for in the autumn she tried her plan again, to the satisfaction of her pupils and the great joy of her friends. She never said much of herself in her letters, and Fanny's first exclamation when they met again, was an anxious "Why, Polly, dear, have you been sick and never told me?" "No, I'm only tired, had a good deal to do lately, and the dull weather makes me just a trifle blue. I shall soon brighten up when I get to my work again," answered Polly, bustling about to put away her things. "You don't look a bit natural. What have you been doing to your precious little self?" persisted Fanny, troubled by the change, yet finding it hard to say wherein it lay. Polly did not look sick, though her cheeks were thinner and her color paler than formerly, but she seemed spiritless, and there was a tired look in her eyes that went to Fanny's heart. "I'm all right enough, as you'll see when I'm in order. I'm proper glad to find you looking so well and happy." "Does all go smoothly, Fan?" asked Polly, beginning to brush her hair industriously. "Answer me one question first," said Fanny, looking as if a sudden fear had come over her. Tell me, truly, have you never repented of your hint to Sydney?" "Never," cried Polly, throwing back the brown veil behind which she had half hidden her face at first. "On your honor, as an honest girl?" "On my honor, as anything you please." "Why do you suspect me of it?" demanded Polly, almost angrily. "Because something is wrong with you. It's no use to deny it, for you've got the look I used to see in that very glass on my own face when I thought he cared for you. Forgive me, Polly, but I can't help saying it, for it is there, and I want to be as true to you as you were to me if I can." Fanny's face was full of agitation, and she spoke fast and frankly, for she was trying to be generous and found it very hard. Polly understood now and put her fear at rest by saying almost passionately, "I tell you I don't love him. If he was the only man in the world, I wouldn't marry him, because I don't want to." The last 3 words were added in a different tone, for Polly had checked herself there with a half-frightened look and turned away to hide her face behind her hair again. "Then if it's not him, it's someone else." "You've got a secret, Polly, and I should think you might tell it, as you know mine," said Fanny, unable to rest till everything was told, for Polly's manner troubled her. There was no answer to her question, but she was satisfied, and putting her arm round her friend, she said, in her most persuasive tone, "My precious Polly, do I know him?" "You have seen him." "And is he very wise, good, and splendid, dear?" "No, he ought to be if you love him." "I hope he isn't bad," cried Fan, anxiously, still holding Polly, who kept her head obstinately turned. "I'm suited, that's enough." "Oh, please just tell me one thing more. Don't he love back again?" "No." "Now don't say another word, I can't bear it," and Polly drew herself away, as she spoke in a desperate sort of tone. "I won't, but now I'm not afraid to tell you that I think, I hope, I do believe that Sydney cares a little for me. He's been very kind to us all, and lately he has seemed to like to see me always when he comes and miss me if I'm gone. I didn't dare to hope anything, till Papa observed something in his manner, and teased me about it. I try not to deceive myself, but it does seem as if there was a chance of happiness for me." "Thank heaven for that," cried Polly, with the heartiest satisfaction in her voice. "Now come and tell me all about it," she added, sitting down on the couch with the air of one who has escaped a great peril. "I've got some notes and things I want to ask your opinion about, if they really mean anything, you know," said Fanny, getting out a bundle of papers from the inmost recesses of her desk. "There's a photograph of Tom, came in his last letter." "Good, isn't it? He looks older, but that's the beard and the rough coat, I suppose. Dear old fellow, he is doing so well, I really begin to feel quite proud of him." Fan tossed her the photograph, and went on rummaging for a certain note. She did not see Polly catch up the picture and look at it with hungry eyes, but she did hear something in the low tone in which Polly said, "It don't do him justice," and glancing over her shoulder, Fan's quick eye caught a glimpse of the truth, though Polly was half turned away from her. Without stopping to think, Fan dropped her letters, took Polly by the shoulders, and cried in a tone full of astonishment, "Polly, is it Tom?" Poor Polly was so taken by surprise, that she had not a word to say. None were needed, her telltale face answered for her, as well as the impulse which made her hide her head in the sofa cushion, like a foolish ostrich when the hunters are after it. "Oh, Polly, I am so glad. I never thought of it. You are so good, and he's such a wild boy. I can't believe it, but it is so dear of you to care for him." Couldn't he help it? Tried not to, but it was so hard, you know, Fan, you know, said a stifled voice from the depths of the very fuzzy cushion which Tom had once condemned. The last words, and the appealing hand outstretched to her, told Fanny the secret of her friend's tender sympathy for her own love troubles, and seemed so pathetic, that she took Polly in her arms, and cried over her, in the fond, foolish way girls have of doing when their hearts are full, and tears can say more than tongues. The silence never lasts long, however, for the feminine desire to talk it over usually gets the better of the deepest emotion. So presently the girls were hard at it, Polly very humble and downcast, Fanny excited and overflowing with curiosity and delight. "Really, my sister? You dear thing, how heavenly that will be," she cried. "It never will be," answered Polly in a tone of calm despair. "What will prevent it?" Maria Bailey, was the tragic reply. "What do you mean? Is she the Western girl? She shan't have Tom, I'll kill her first." "Too late, let me tell you. Is that door shut, and Maud safe?" Fanny reconnoitered, and returning, listened breathlessly, while Polly poured into her ear the bitter secret which was preying on her soul. Hasn't he mentioned Maria in his letters? "Once or twice, but sort of jokingly, and I thought it was only some little flirtation. He can't have time for much of that fun, he's so busy. Ned writes good, gossipy letters. I taught him how, and he tells me all that's going on." When he'd spoken of this girl several times, they bored with her mother, you know, I asked about her, quite carelessly, and he told me she was pretty, good, and well educated, and he thought Tom was rather smitten. That was a blow, for you see, Fan, since Trix broke the engagement, and it wasn't wrong to think of Tom, I let myself hope, just a little, and was so happy. Now I must give it up, and now I see how much I hoped, and what a dreadful loss it's going to be." Two great tears rolled down Polly's cheeks, and Fanny wiped them away, feeling an intense desire to go west by the next train, with a Maria Bailey with a single look, and bring Tom back as a gift to Polly. "It was so stupid of me not to guess before. But you see, Tom always seems so like a boy, and you are more womanly for your age than any girl I know, so I never thought of your caring for him in that way. I knew you were very good to him, you are to everyone, my precious, and I knew that he was fond of you as he is of me, fonder if anything, because he thinks you are perfect. But still I never dreamed of his loving you as more than a dear friend." "He doesn't," sighed Polly. "Well, he ought, and if I could get hold of him, he should. Polly clutched Fan at that, and held her tight, saying sternly, "If you ever breathe a word, drop a hint, look a look that will tell him or anyone else about me, yes, as sure as my name is Mary Milton, I'll proclaim from the housetops that you like our." Polly got no further, for Fan's hand was on her mouth, and Fan's alarmed voice vehemently protested, "I won't. I promise solemnly I'll never say a word to a mortal creature." "Don't be so fierce, Polly, you quite frighten me. It's bad enough to love someone who don't love you, but to have them told of it is perfectly awful. It makes me wild just to think of it. Oh, Fan, I'm getting so ill-tempered and envious and wicked, I don't know what will happen to me. I'm not afraid for you, my dear, and I do believe things will go right, because you are so good to everyone. How Tom could help adoring you I don't see. I know he would if he had stayed at home longer after he got rid of Trix. It would be the making of him, but though he is my brother, I don't think he's good enough for you, Polly, and I don't quite see how you can care for him so much, when you might have had a person so infinitely superior." "I don't want a superior person, he'd tire me if he was like a S. Besides, I do think Tom is superior to him in many things." "Well, you needn't stare, I know he is, or will be. He's so different, and very young, and has lots of faults, I know, but I like him all the better for it, and he's honest and brave, and has got a big, warm heart, and I'd rather have him care for me than the wisest, best, most accomplished man in the world, simply because I love him." If Tom could only have seen Polly's face when she said that! It was so tender, earnest, and defiant, that Fanny forgot the defense of her own lover in admiration of Polly's loyalty to hers, for this faithful, all-absorbing love was a new revelation to Fanny, who was used to hearing her friends boast of 2 or 3 lovers a year, and calculate their respective values, with almost as much coolness as the young men discussed the fortunes of the girls they wished for, but could not afford to marry. She had thought her love for Sydney very romantic, because she did not really care whether he was rich or poor, though she never dared to say so, even to Polly, for fear of being laughed at. She began to see now what true love was, and to feel that the sentiment which she could not conquer was a treasure to be accepted with reverence, and cherished with devotion. "I don't know when I began to love Tom, but I found out that I did last winter, and was as much surprised as you are," continued Polly, as if glad to unburden her heart. "I didn't approve of him at all. I thought he was extravagant, reckless, and dandified. I was very much disappointed when he chose Trix, and the more I thought and saw of it, the worse I felt, for Tom was too good for her, and I hated to see her do so little for him, when she might have done so much, because he is one of the men who can be led by their affections, and the woman he marries can make or mar him." "That's true," cried Fan, as Polly paused to look at the picture, which appeared to regard her with a grave, steady look, which seemed rather to belie her assertions. "I don't mean that he's weak or bad. If he was, I should hate him, but he does need someone to love him very much, and make him happy, as a good woman best knows how," said Polly, as if answering the mute language of Tom's face. "I hope Maria Bailey is all he thinks her," she added, softly, "for I couldn't bear to have him disappointed again. I dare say he don't care a fig for her, and you are only borrowing trouble." "What do you say?" Ned answered when you asked about this inconvenient girl, said Fanny, turning hopeful all at once. Polly repeated it, and added, "I asked him in another letter if he didn't admire Miss B as much as Tom, and he wrote back that she was a nice girl but he had no time for nonsense, and I needn't get my white kids ready for some years yet, unless to dance at Tom's wedding. Since then he hasn't mentioned Maria, so I was sure there was something serious going on, and being in Tom's confidence, he kept quiet. It does look bad. Suppose I say a word to Tom, just inquire after his heart in a general way, you know, and give him a chance to tell me, if there is anything to tell. I'm willing, but you must let me see the letter. I can't trust you not to hint or say too much." "You shall. I'll keep my promise in spite of everything, but it will be hard to see things going wrong when a word would set it right. You know what will happen if you do," and Polly looked so threatening that Fan trembled before her, discovering that the gentlest girls when roused are more impressive than any shrew, for even turtle doves peck gallantly to defend their nests. "If it is true about Maria, what shall we do?" said Fanny after a pause. "Bear it. People always do bear things," somehow answered Polly, looking as if sentence had been passed upon her. "But if it isn't he," cried Fan, unable to endure the sight. "Then I shall wait." And Polly's face changed so beautifully that Fan hugged her on the spot, fervently wishing that Maria Bailey never had been born. Then the conversation turned to lover number 2, and after a long confabulation, Polly gave it as her firm belief that S had forgotten and was rapidly finding consolation in the regard of FS. With this satisfactory decision the council ended after the ratification of a loyal league, by which the friends pledged themselves to stand staunchly by one another, through the trials of the coming year. It was a very different winter from the last for both the girls. Fanny applied herself to her duties with redoubled ardor, for S was a domestic man, and admired housewifely accomplishments. If Fanny wanted to show him what she could do toward making a pleasant home, she certainly succeeded better than she suspected, for in spite of many failures and discouragements behind the scenes, the little house became a most attractive place, to Mr. Sidney at least, for he was more the house friend than ever, and seemed determined to prove that change of fortune made no difference to him. Fanny had been afraid that Polly's return might endanger her hopes, but Sidney met Polly with the old friendliness, and very soon convinced her that the nipping in the bud process had been effectual, for being taken early, the sprouting affection had died easy, and left room for an older friendship to blossom into a happier love. Fanny seemed glad of this, and Polly soon set her heart at rest by proving that she had no wish to try her power. She kept much at home when the day's work was done, finding it pleasanter to sit dreaming over book or sewing alone, than to exert herself even to go to the shores. Fan don't need me, and Sydney don't care whether I come or not, so I'll keep out of the way, she would say, as if to excuse her seeming indolence. Polly was not at all like herself that winter, and those nearest to her saw and wondered at it most. Will got very anxious. She was so quiet, pale and spiritless, and distracted poor Polly by his affectionate stupidity, till she completed his bewilderment by getting cross and scolding him. So he consoled himself with Maud, who, now being in her teens, assumed dignified airs, and ordered him about in a style that afforded him continued amusement and employment. Western news continued vague, for Fan's general inquiries produced only provokingly unsatisfactory replies from Tom, who sang the praises of the beautiful Miss Bailey and professed to be consumed by a hopeless passion for somebody, in such half-comic, half-tragic terms, that the girls could not decide whether it was all that boy's mischief or only a cloak to hide the dreadful truth. "We'll have it out of him when he comes home in the spring," said Fanny to Polly, as they compared the letters of their brothers, and agreed that men were the most uncommunicative and provoking animals under the sun. For Ned was so absorbed in business that he ignored the whole Bailey question and left them in utter darkness. Hunger of any sort is a hard thing to bear, especially when the sufferer has a youthful appetite, and Polly was kept on such a short allowance of happiness for 6 months, that she got quite thin and interesting, and often, when she saw how big her eyes were getting, and how plainly the veins on her temples showed, indulged the pensive thought that perhaps spring dandelions might blossom o'er her grave. She had no intention of dying till Tom's visit was over, however, and as the time drew near, she went through such alternations of hope and fear, and lived in such a state of feverish excitement, that spirits and color came back, and she saw that the interesting pallor she had counted on would be an entire failure. May came at last, and with it a burst of sunshine which cheered even poor Polly's much enduring heart. Fanny came walking in upon her one day, looking as if she brought tidings of such great joy that she hardly knew how to tell them. "Prepare yourself, somebody is engaged," she said, in a solemn tone, that made Polly put up her hand as if to ward off an expected blow. "No, don't look like that, my poor dear, it isn't Tom, it's I." Of course there was a rapture, followed by one of the deliciously confidential talks which bosom friends enjoy, interspersed with tears and kisses, smiles and sighs. "Oh, Polly, though I've waited and hoped so long I couldn't believe it when it came, and don't deserve it, but I will, for the knowledge that he loves me seems to make everything possible," said Fanny, with an expression which made her really beautiful, for the first time in her life. "You happy girl," sighed Polly, then smiled and added, "I think you deserve all that's come to you, for you have truly tried to be worthy of it, and whether it ever came or not, that would have been a thing to be proud of." "He says that is what made him love me," answered Fanny, never calling her lover by his name, but making the little personal pronoun a very sweet word by the tone in which she uttered it. "He was disappointed in me last year, he told me, but you said good things about me, and though he didn't care much then, yet when he lost you, and came back to me, he found that you were not altogether mistaken, and he has watched me all this winter, learning to respect and love me better every day." "Oh, Polly," when he said that, I couldn't bear it, because in spite of all my trying, I'm still so weak and poor and silly. "We don't think so, and I know you'll be all he hopes to find you, for he's just the husband you ought to have." "Thank you all the more, then, for not keeping him yourself," said Fanny, laughing the old blithe laugh again. "That was only a slight aberration of his, he knew better all the time. It was your white cloak and my idiotic behavior the night we went to the opera that put the idea into his head," said Polly, feeling as if the events of that evening had happened some 20 years ago, when she was a giddy young thing, fond of gay bonnets and girlish pranks. "I'm not going to tell Tom a word about it, but keep it for a surprise till he comes. He will be here next week, and then we'll have a grand clearing up of mysteries," said Fan, evidently feeling that the millennium was at hand. "Perhaps," said Polly, as her heart fluttered and then sunk, for this was a case where she could do nothing but hope, and keep her hands busy with Will's new set of shirts. "There is a good deal more of this sort of silent suffering than the world suspects, for the women who dare are few, the women who stand and wait are many. But if work baskets were gifted with powers of speech, they could tell stories more true and tender than any we read. For women often sew the tragedy or comedy of life into their work as they sit apparently safe and serene at home, yet are thinking deeply, living whole-heart histories, and praying fervent prayers while they embroider pretty trifles or do the weekly mending." Chapter 19. Tom's success come, Philander, let us be a-marching, every one his true love a-searching would be the most appropriate motto for this chapter, because, intimidated by the threats, denunciations, and complaints showered upon me in consequence of taking the liberty to end a certain story as I liked, I now yield to the amiable desire of giving satisfaction, and, at the risk of outraging all the unities, intend to pair off everybody I can lay my hands on. Occasionally a matrimonial epidemic appears, especially toward spring, devastating society, thinning the ranks of bachelordom, and leaving mothers lamenting for their fairest daughters. That spring the disease broke out with great violence in the Shore Circle, causing paternal heads much bewilderment, as one case after another appeared with alarming rapidity. Fanny, as we have seen, was stricken first, and hardly had she been carried safely through the crisis, when Tom returned to swell the list of victims. As Fanny was out a good deal with her Arthur, who was sure that exercise was necessary for the convalescent, Polly went every day to see Mrs. Shaw, who found herself lonely, though much better than usual, for the engagement had a finer effect upon her constitution than any tonic she ever tried. Some 3 days after Fan's joyful call, Polly was startled on entering the Shaw's door, by Maud, who came tumbling downstairs, sending an avalanche of words before her. "He's come before he said he should to surprise us. He's up in Mamma's room, and was just saying, 'How's Polly?' when I heard you come, in your creep-mouse way, and you must go right up. He looks so funny with whiskers, but he's ever so nice, real big and brown, and he swung me right up when he kissed me. Never mind your bonnet, I can't wait." And pouncing upon Polly, Maud dragged her away like a captured ship towed by a noisy little steam tug. "The sooner it's over the better for me," was the only thought Polly had time for before she plunged into the room above, propelled by Maud, who cried triumphantly, "There he is! Ain't he splendid?" For a minute, everything danced before Polly's eyes, as a hand shook hers warmly, and a gruffish voice said heartily, "How are you, Polly?" Then she slipped into a chair beside Mrs. Shaw, hoping that her reply had been all right and proper, for she had not the least idea what she said. Things got steady again directly, and while Maud expatiated on the great surprise, Polly ventured to look at Tom, feeling glad that her back was toward the light, and his was not. It was not a large room, and Tom seemed to fill it entirely, not that he had grown so very much, except broader in the shoulders, but there was a brisk, genial, free and easy air about him, suggestive of a stirring, out-of-door life, with people who kept their eyes wide open, and were not very particular what they did with their arms and legs. The rough-and-ready traveling suit, stout boots, brown face, and manly beard, changed him so much, that Polly could find scarcely a trace of elegant Tom Shaw in the hearty-looking young man who stood with one foot on a chair, while he talked business to his father in a sensible way, which delighted the old gentleman. Polly liked the change immensely, and sat listening to the state of Western trade with as much interest as if it had been the most thrilling romance, for, as he talked, Tom kept looking at her with a nod or a smile so like old times, that for a little while, she forgot Maria Bailey, and was in bliss. By and by Fanny came flying in, and gave Tom a greater surprise than his had been. He had not the least suspicion of what had been going on at home, for Fan had said to herself, with girlish malice, "If he don't choose to tell me his secrets, I'm not going to tell mine," and had said nothing about Sydney, except an occasional allusion to his being often there, and very kind. Therefore, when she announced her engagement, Tom looked so staggered for a minute, that Fan thought he didn't like it, but after the first surprise passed, he showed such an affectionate satisfaction, that she was both touched and flattered. "What do you think of this performance?" asked Tom, wheeling round to Polly, who still sat by Mrs. Shaw, in the shadow of the bed curtains. "I like it very much," she said in such a hearty tone, that Tom could not doubt the genuineness of her pleasure. "Glad of that. Hope you'll be as well pleased with another engagement that's coming out before long," and with an odd laugh, Tom carried Sydney off to his den, leaving the girls to telegraph to one another the awful message, "It is Maria Bailey." How she managed to get through that evening, Polly never knew, yet it was not a long one, for at 8 o'clock she slipped out of the room, meaning to run home alone, and not compel anyone to serve as escort. But she did not succeed, for as she stood warming her rubbers at the dining-room fire, wondering pensively as she did so if Maria Bailey had small feet, and if Tom ever put her rubbers on for her, the little overshoes were taken out of her hands, and Tom's voice said, reproachfully, Did you really mean to run away, and not let me go home with you? I'm not afraid, I didn't want to take you away, began Polly, secretly hoping that she didn't look too pleased. But I like to be taken away. Why, it's a whole year since I went home with you. Do you remember that? Said Tom, flapping the rubbers about without any signs of haste. Does it seem long? Everlasting. Polly meant to say that quite easily, and smile incredulously at his answer, but in spite of the coquettish little rose-colored hood she wore, and which she knew was very becoming, she did not look or speak gaily, and Tom saw something in the altered face that made him say hastily, I'm afraid you've been doing too much this winter, you look tired out, Polly. Oh, no, it suits me to be very busy, and she began to drag on her gloves as if to prove it. But it doesn't suit me to have you get thin and pale, you know. Polly looked up to thank him, but never did, for there was something deeper than gratitude in the honest blue eyes, that could not hide the truth entirely. Tom saw it, flushed all over his brown face, and dropping the rubbers with a crash, took her hands, saying, in his old impetuous way, Polly, I want to tell you something. Yes, I know, we've been expecting it. I hope you'll be very happy, Tom, and Polly shook his hands with a smile that was more pathetic than a flood of tears. What? Cried Tom, looking as if he thought she had lost her mind. Ned told us all about her, he thought it would be so, and when you spoke of another engagement, we knew you meant your own. But I didn't. Ned's the man, he told me to tell you. It's just settled. Is it Maria? Cried Polly, holding on to a chair as if to be prepared for anything. Of course. Who else should it be? He didn't say you talked about her most, and so we thought, stammered Polly, falling into a sudden flutter. That I was in love. Well, I am, but not with her. Oh, and Polly caught her breath as if a dash of cold water had fallen on her, for the more in earnest Tom grew, the blunter he became. Do you want to know the name of the girl I've loved for more than a year? Well, it's Polly. As he spoke, Tom stretched out his arms to her, with the sort of mute eloquence that cannot be resisted, and Polly went straight into them, without a word. Never mind what happened for a little bit. Love scenes, if genuine, are indescribable, for to those who have enacted them, the most elaborate description seems tame, and to those who have not, the simplest picture seems overdone. So romancers had better let imagination paint for them that which is above all art, and leave their lovers to themselves during the happiest minutes of their lives. Before long, Tom and Polly were sitting side by side, enjoying the blissful state of mind which usually follows the first step out of our work-a-day world, into the glorified region wherein lovers rapturously exist for a month or two. Tom just sat and looked at Polly as if he found it difficult to believe that the winter of his discontent had ended in this glorious spring. But Polly, being a true woman, asked questions, even while she laughed and cried for joy. Now, Tom, how could I know you loved me when you went away and never said a word, she began, in a tenderly reproachful tone, thinking of the hard year she had spent. And how could I have the courage to say a word, when I had nothing on the face of the earth to offer you but my worthless self, answered Tom, warmly. That was all I wanted, whispered Polly, in a tone which caused him to feel that the race of angels was not entirely extinct. I've always been fond of you, my Polly, but I never realized how fond till just before I went away. I was free, you know, and besides I had a strong impression that you liked Sydney in spite of the damper which Fan hinted you gave him last winter. He's such a capital fellow, I really don't see how you could help it. It is strange, I don't understand it myself, but women are queer creatures, and there's no accounting for their tastes, said Polly, with a sly look, which Tom fully appreciated. You were so good to me those last days, that I came very near speaking out, but couldn't bear to seem to be offering you a poor, disgraced sort of fellow, whom tricks wouldn't have, and no one seemed to think worth much. No, I said to myself, Polly ought to have the best, if Sid can get her, let him, and I won't say a word. I'll try to be better worthy her friendship, anyway, and perhaps, when I've proved that I can do something, and am not ashamed to work, then, if Polly is free, I shan't be afraid to try my chance. So I held my tongue, worked like a horse, satisfied myself and others that I could get my living honestly, and then came home to see if there was any hope for me. And I was waiting for you all the time, said a soft voice close to his shoulder, for Polly was much touched by Tom's manly efforts to deserve her. I didn't mean to do it the first minute, but look about me a little, and be sure Sid was all right. But Fan's news settled that point, and just now the look in my Polly's face settled the other. I couldn't wait another minute, or let you either, and I couldn't help stretching out my arms to my little wife, God bless her, though I know I don't deserve her. Tom's voice got lower and lower as he spoke, and his face was full of an emotion of which he need not be ashamed, for a very sincere love ennobled him, making him humble, where a shallower affection would have been proud of its success. Polly understood this, and found the honest, hearty speech of her lover more eloquent than poetry itself. Her hand stole up to his cheek, and she leaned her own confidingly against the rough coat, as she said, in her frank simple way, Tom, dear, don't say that, as if I was the best girl in the world. I've got ever so many faults, and I want you to know them all, and help me cure them, as you have your own. Waiting has not done us any harm, and I love you all the better for your trial. But I'm afraid your year has been harder than mine, you look so much older and graver than when you went away. You never would complain, but I've had a feeling that you were going through a good deal more than any of us guessed. Pretty tough work at first, I own. It was all so new and strange, I'm afraid I shouldn't have stood it if it had not been for Ned. He'd laugh and say pooh, if he heard me say it, but it's true nevertheless that he's a grand fellow and helped me through the first 6 months like a brother as he is. There was no reason why he should go out of his way to back up a shiftless party like me, Yet he did, and made many things easy and safe that would have been confoundedly hard and dangerous if I'd been left to myself. The only way I can explain it is that it's a family trait, and as natural to the brother as it is to the sister. It's a sure trait to do the same. But tell me about Maria. Is Ned really engaged to her? Very much so. You'll get a letter full of raptures tomorrow. He hadn't time to send by me. I came off in such a hurry. Maria is a sensible, pretty girl and Ned will be a happy old fellow. Why did you let us think it was you? I only teased Fan a little. I did like Maria, for she reminded me of you sometimes, and was such a kind, cozy little woman I couldn't help enjoying her society after a hard day's work. But Ned got jealous, and then I knew that he was in earnest, so I left him a clear field, and promised not to breathe a word to anyone till he had got a yes or no from his Maria. I wish I'd known it, sighed Polly. People in love always do such stupid things. So they do, for neither you nor Fan gave us poor fellows the least hint about Sid, and there I've been having all sorts of scares about you. Serves us right, brothers and sisters shouldn't have secrets from each other. We never will again. Did you miss me very much? Yes, Tom, very, very much. My patient little Polly. Did you really care for me before you went? See if I didn't. And with great pride Tom produced a portly pocketbook stuffed with business-like documents of a most imposing appearance, opened a private compartment, and took out a worn-looking paper, unfolded it carefully, and displayed a small brown object which gave out a faint fragrance. That's the rose you put in the birthday cake, and next week we'll have a fresh one in another jolly little cake which you'll make me. You left it on the floor of my den the night we talked there, and I've kept it ever since. There's love and romance for you. Polly touched the little relic, treasured for a year, and smiled to read the words My Polly's Rose scribbled under the crumbling leaves. I didn't know you could be so sentimental, she said, looking so pleased that he did not regret confessing his folly. I never was till I loved you, my dear, and I'm not very bad yet, for I don't wear my posy next my heart, but where I can see it every day, and so never forget for whom I am working. Shouldn't he wonder if that bit of nonsense had kept me economical, honest, and hard at it, for I never opened my pocketbook that I didn't think of you. That's lovely. Tom and Polly found it so touching that she felt for her handkerchief, but Tom took it away, and made her laugh instead of cry, by saying, in a wheedlesome tone, I don't believe you did as much, for all your romance. Did you, now? If you won't laugh, I'll show you my treasures. I began first, and I've worn them longest. As she spoke, Polly drew out the old locket, opened it, and showed the picture Tom gave her in the bag of peanuts cut small and fitted in on one side. On the other was a curl of reddish hair and a black button. How Tom laughed when he saw them. You don't mean you've kept that frightful guy of a boy all this time? Polly. Polly. You are the most faithful loveress, as Maud says, that was ever known. Don't flatter yourself that I've worn it all these years, sir. I only put it in last spring because I didn't dare to ask for one of the new ones. The button came off the old coat you insisted on wearing after the failure, as if it was your duty to look as shabby as possible, and the curl I stole from Maud. Aren't we silly? He did not seem to think so, and after a short pause for refreshments, Polly turned serious, and said anxiously, "When must you go back to your hard work?" "In a week or two, but it won't seem drudgery now, for you'll write every day, and I shall feel that I'm working to get a home for you. That will give me a 40-man power, and I'll pay up my debts and get a good start. And then Ned and I will be married and go into partnership, and we'll all be the happiest, busiest people in the West." "It sounds delightful, but won't it take a long time, Tom?" "Only a few years, and we needn't wait a minute after Sid is paid, if you don't mind beginning rather low down, Polly. I'd rather work up with you than sit idle while you toil away all alone. That's the way Father and Mother did, and I think they were very happy in spite of the poverty and hard work." "Then we'll do it by another year, for I must get more salary before I take you away from a good home here. I wish, oh, Polly, how I wish I had a half of the money I've wasted, to make you comfortable, now." "Never mind, I don't want it, I'd rather have less, and know you earned it all yourself," cried Polly, as Tom struck his hand on his knee with an acute pang of regret at the power he had lost. "It's like you to say it, and I won't waste any words bewailing myself, because I was a fool. We will work up together, my brave Polly, and you shall yet be proud of your husband, though he is poor Tom Shaw." She was as sure of that as if an oracle had foretold it, and was not deceived, for the loving heart that had always seen, believed, and tried to strengthen all good impulses in Tom, was well repaid for its instinctive trust by the happiness of the years to come. "Yes," she said, hopefully, "I know you will succeed, for the best thing a man can have is work with a purpose in it, and the will to do it heartily." "There is one better thing," Polly answered Tom, turning her face up a little, that he might see his inspiration shining in her eyes. "What is it, dear?" "A good woman to love and help him all his life, as you will me, please God." "Even though she is old-fashioned," whispered Polly, with happy eyes, the brighter for their tears, as she looked up at the young man, who, through her, had caught a glimpse of the truest success, and was not ashamed to owe it to love and labor, two beautiful old fashions that began long ago, with the first pair in Eden. Lest any of my young readers who have honored Maud with their interest should suffer the pangs of unsatisfied curiosity as to her future, I will add for their benefit that she did not marry Will, but remained a busy, lively spinster all her days, and kept house for her father in the most delightful manner. Will's ministerial dream came to pass in the course of time, however, and a gentle, bright-eyed lady ruled over the parsonage, whom the Reverend William called his little Jane. Farther into futurity even this rash pen dares not proceed, but pauses here, concluding in the words of the dear old fairy tales, "And so they were married, and all lived happily till they died." End of the Project Gutenberg ebook. An old-fashioned girl updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General terms of use.